Why are millions of young men simply vanishing from the workforce? And no, I'm not talking about those who are unemployed or in school. I'm talking about the sort of guys who've just opted out of the system entirely. Men who have become NEETs, not in education, employment, or training. Across America, about 10% of 25 to 55-year-old men, the sort of guys who are either in their prime or at the peak of their labor-producing lives, are not only not working, they don't even get counted as unemployed because they aren't even looking for work. And that number is growing over time. In fact, the male labor force participation rate is now sitting at almost an all-time low. In the 1940s and 50s, well over 85% of all men were in the workforce. Today, that number is just 68%. And that collapse has been driven largely by the rise of the NEETs. And the part that almost no politician wants to talk about is that 2/3 of them are either living on disability checks or they're living with somebody who is living on a disability check. And the question is, how did we get here? I mean, are all of these guys injured and unable to work? I mean, well, some of them certainly are. I mean, that sort of thing is the whole reason why the government established programs like disability payments in the first place. But has the workforce really become less safe since the 1950s? Hardly. Workplace fatalities and injuries have plummeted since records began to be kept in the early 1970s. So what's actually going on? I mean, it would be easy to claim that all of these guys are just lazy. And much like the genuinely injured or disabled, some of them certainly are lazy. I mean, after all, so long as there is a government that is willing to pay people not to work, it's inevitable that some people will take the offer up. But the bigger reason so many men are dropping out of the workforce is not because they're getting injured or they're just lazy. It's that millions of men don't see the value in working anymore. And that crisis is only made worse by the fact that we have a broken disability system encouraging an already demoralized population to just stop bothering. I mean, just think about the incentive structure society and the government have been reinforcing for the last several decades. At the same time that we have taught at least 2 generations of men that their work doesn't matter, that their masculinity is toxic, and that the system doesn't need them, we've also created a permanent welfare system that encourages them to give up, pays them to give up. Perhaps the bigger question isn't why so many men are dropping out of the workforce, but rather why anyone still remains at all. And that would all be bad enough in itself. But like so many other problems the government creates, there's a bunch of second and third order effects that make things even worse. For instance, men without jobs are far less likely to marry, far less likely to raise children, and far more likely to become socially isolated. As more of them drop out of the workforce, things like drug abuse, alcoholism, and crime step in to fill the void that stable jobs and strong families used to occupy. And this carries over into other fields of life. It's not a coincidence that the decline in men's participation in the workforce has also coincided with a decline in community. Things like church attendance, the number of friendships people have, and even the birth rate are all downstream from this crisis. And as people have become more and more alienated and atomized over the last 50 years, it's not like we've become more free or prosperous or happy. Quite the opposite. As these traditional social bonds have vanished, they've been replaced by the state. So not only is the government exacerbating this crisis on the front end, it's then using these trends to massively expand its scope on the back end. This creates something of a feedback loop where more men drop out of the workforce, leading to more atomization, which leads to a growing vacuum that the government then gets to occupy with yet even more programs and policies that only further drive men out of the picture. So the question is, how do we fix it? Well, like most feedback loops, it's a lot harder to stop once it's already begun. It's easy to say reform welfare or stop paying people to sit at home, and those would be great ideas. And with a looming federal debt crisis on the horizon, those things are even more necessary now than ever before. But the solutions can't end there. Ultimately, we have to reverse not just the flow of money, but also the inverted value system that society has been pushing for the last several generations. That means teaching young men that their lives do have a purpose, and that providing, building, and working are essential elements of building a civilization that they are in fact responsible for and should be appreciated for. Now, the good news is the feedback loop also works in the opposite direction. For each 1% increase in male prime age participation, you add about 1.6 million workers back into the economy. And that directly boosts everything from tax revenue to population growth to reduce government dependency. But this is only possible if we stop thinking that America simply has a jobs crisis instead of a masculinity crisis. And a nation without men who work, build, and provide isn't a nation that lasts long. But if we're the sort of country that wants men to step up and take their proper role within society, it'd probably be good to get back to the sort of nation that actually respects men who do that and celebrates masculinity instead of demeaning it as toxic and unnecessary.